Welcome, everybody, to Know Your Education Rights. As you can see, you're in the right place at the right time. And, as people enter, I'll continue to state that we are here live. I unfortunately am having technical difficulties, so I will be joining the session without a video, but there is a presentation, so you're in the right place. Again, welcome to Know Your Education Rights, FERPA edition, learning the legal basics about the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, right? A lot of times I get, people that come. My name's Christina Laster, by the way, K-12 Policy and Legislation Ambassador. If you have any questions as we're going along, go ahead and drop those questions in the chat, and I will answer them to the best of my ability and as I see them. And if you have comments, appropriate comments based on what we're talking about, go ahead and drop those in the chat too. And I will definitely try to reply to those with the feedback that I have about what you're saying too. So a lot of times, as parents and caretakers of children that are school age, K-12 education, we have this thought about records, right? We want to know what's in our kids' records. We want to know if it's accurate. Sometimes, there's some behavior issues that take place. What is it that you can have access to? How do you do it, right? And so that is what we're going to be understanding, the legal basics about how to, first of all, maintain privacy in your child's records and your personally identifiable information, but then also how to be able to get the records and what rights you have. So I want to go to a quote before we start the lesson, and that is from Thurgood Marshall. We must dissent from indifference. We must dissent from apathy. We must dissent from the fear, the hatred, and the mistrust. We must dissent from a nation that has buried its head in the sand, waiting in the vain for the needs of its poor, its elderly, and its sick to disappear and just blow away. We must dissent from a government that has left its young without jobs, education, or hope. We must dissent from the poverty of vision and the absence of moral leadership. We must dissent because America can do better, because America has no choice but to do better. And so, I want you just to be thinking about that, right? Like, where is it that you need to dissent, right? It's not going to feel comfortable, and it doesn't always feel pleasant, but when you are advocating for your rights and your child, you're not going to be able to agree with everyone all the time. There might be times where you're not able to collaborate, and you shouldn't feel any shame or any guilt about that, right? Like, you have to pursue what is best for your child because they don't get another opportunity to get an education. They go through kindergarten to 12th grade. Some of them go to nursery or, pre-K, and that's fine. But they're not going to get an opportunity to get their education in those years back. One thing that we all share in common, everybody on the face of this planet, is that we get one period of a day, right? From sun up to the next sunrise, right? And once that day is gone, it doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or if you're the most powerful person on the face of this planet, or you think you are, right? Because everybody thinks they have these powers they don't have, but we'll talk about that another time. You will not be able to redeem the day if you lost it, okay? And so we don't want our children sitting in places where they're getting failed, and they don't have what they need and wasting that time. We don't want to succumb to that kind of stuff, and you definitely don't want to concede your child's life to a failing education system, okay? So we will be providing these weekly training sessions so that you can understand the policies and laws, that regulations, rules, codes about education, and I hope that you share this information. You can find this information at the page that you're at, or if you know someone that doesn't have a Facebook, share it with them on YouTube. You can go to YouTube at The Bold Authority and find it as well for those of you that may have connectivity issues and don't are not able to get it on Facebook, or if you know someone that may need to see this, then get them on the phone and get them here. Okay, so let's go to FERPA, right? So as you can see, I have my policy and legislation board up here, and I want to tell you exactly what you're going to learn so you can understand what to expect during this time that you're going to spend. In this lesson, you will develop an understanding of how to use the United States statute and code, U.S. code. That's what that U.S.C means. So sometimes you might see that in print behind regulations or rules. So I want you to know that that's what it means, U.S. code. To advocate effectively for your rights. I want you to leave here with the ability and understanding of how to best use the information that you get to advocate effectively for your rights. Okay? So I want to give you some tips. You know, a lot of the words in policy, statute, code, and legislation can be a little bit, complicated or challenging, right? Especially if you're not used to the language and the words that they use, but we can't avoid them. We need to be able to have times like this where we can break it down step by step and understand exactly what is being said about us, what rules are governing our lives, whether we like government or not. I recognize for the majority of us that may be viewing this, rules, regulations, laws, policies, codes, those types of things have been weaponized against us, and historically, I get it. And so avoiding them, though, is not the answer. Like having an understanding of what is being said about you, who is making that decision for you? Are you really in control of your child's education, right? That is better than saying, well, I don't understand what's being said, so I'm just going to avoid the conversation and I'm not going to, really try to lean into the complicated words and all of these things and policies and laws. No, you need to know exactly what is happening. So tips for maximum success: take notes, right? It's good to write down what you're processing in your mind as this information is coming out. Sometimes we can be watching something or listening to someone talking, a thought, an idea will come up in our heads, or an experience, right? It'll trigger an experience. I want you even to write those down because it triggered that memory, that thought, that idea for a reason. And as you all know, we can walk away, and because we're parents and grandparents, aunts and uncles, caretakers of children, we can walk away and the kids can say, I'm hungry, or anything can happen, right? And we'll forget what we were thinking throughout the process of learning this information. So take notes and try to avoid distractions as much as you can. If you have to walk away, if you have a portable device that you're viewing this on, just take it with you, and listen, right? You might not be able to take notes at that moment, but you will be able to at least listen in and still get the information that you need to extract for yourself. Fact check, right? I welcome anyone watching this to, if they have a question about the information that I'm sharing, to go and do some research or search for the information, fact check the information. One way to fact check the information is to make sure that you are using a credible source of information, a verifiable source of information, and look at the evidence, right? So if I'm talking about policy, law, and code, I'm not going to go look for an example on, some kind of website that is talking about entertainment, right? I really wouldn't do that. I'm going to go straight to the source, like, where is this policy at? Where is this code at? Let me see what the author's intentions were behind writing this. That's the kind of research I want you to start to practice fact checking information. Ask questions. like I said, there's a comment area or a chat. If you're watching on YouTube, you can live chat, and you can put your questions or your feedback in that area of the comments or the live chat, wherever you're watching from. Okay. And I will do my best to make sure I address all of them. Search. Why did I put search instead of research? Because for the first time, some of you may be hearing some of this information, right? And when you have a in front of a word, it means to do it all over again. And so if it's your first time, it wouldn't be something that you research, but it's something that you're going to be searching for more information about the first time. Inquire. That's the question asking. There is no dumb question. All of the questions that you have around the law, policies, and codes, Privacy Act, which we're covering tonight, FERPA, are relevant. You need to know this information, and the only way that you're going to be able to get your questions answered is not by keeping them in your head. It's by seeking the answers. Okay, so inquire, study. Right? Some of the things that I'm going to be talking about are going to be, like I said, things that you've seen for the first time. So you definitely going to want to take the time whenever you have the ability every day. I would practice studying some part of it every day, just so that you can get that information and know exactly how to use it. And then you'll be able to share it after you put it into practice. But studying, apply, right? I just talked about putting things into practice. We can talk about something that we want to do every day of the week, but until we actually take the knowledge and experiences and the skill set that we have and apply that thing or to that thing, it's just a thought, right? And so application, taking the knowledge and putting it into action. Then I have research, okay? So just in case you forget, you need to brush up on the information, you go back and you search for it again, research, all right? Put what you learn into direct action. I cannot emphasize that enough. If we walk away with all of this information and we do not put it to use, it goes somewhere in our subconscious mind, and you might be able to retrieve parts of it or whatever. So we need to, in order to master a thing, you have to put it into action and you have to practice it, okay? So again, we're here at Know Your Rights, Education Rights, learning the legal basics, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. If you're just joining, I made an announcement at the beginning that I am having technical issues, so I'm not going to be on camera, but that's okay. You'll see this lovely presentation. My name's Christina Laster. I'm the K-12 Policy and Legislation Ambassador, and this information is streaming on multiple pages and also on YouTube for those of you that may need more accessibility or have a neighbor. Go share this with your friend. All right. So let's see here. So when you see this come up, just know we're about to lean in, right? Like, I like to have visual cues. And so you see this father, and he's teaching his daughter some reading, how to read, or reading to her. And so just when you see this lovely father and daughter reading this book, know that we're about to dive in deeper. We're about to lean in. So you have that visual warning that, yes, we got to go for it. Okay, so I want to basically talk about sorry, let me get my slide up. You guys give me 1 second. Okay. Let me see if you guys can see that. Okay, so what is FERPA? FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. So when you hear the word FERPA, that's what it stands for. The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, okay? It is a federal law that affords parents the right to have access to their children's education records, right? So this is not FOIA. A lot of times people will confuse it with, well, I can just Freedom of Information Act request that. Well, you might not be able to, because we're talking about minors and there might be some nuances in the law that you don't understand. You can't just FOIA that. But you do have rights under FERPA. Okay. So whereas FOIA is the Freedom of Information Act, okay, FOIA, Open and Public Records Requests Act, are it's frequently called at the state level. FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, okay, which is the federal law. All right. So it's good to know the difference between what's local, state, and federal, and who has jurisdiction over that, and how you can, have access. So this law affords parents the right to access their children's education records, the right to seek to have their records amended. Okay. So under FERPA, parents and families, you have the right to have your child's records amended if you believe that they have not been accurate, right? One example of this is that I have parents who will say, what can I do if a grade isn't correct? And it's on my child's report card, and I asked the teacher, and, I even talked to the principal about it, and they said, well, too late. That semester's already over. No, that's not true. If you have proof and you have already tried your normal course of action, learn when to escalate it. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. You have the right to have records amended, okay? And the right to have some control over the disclosure of personally identifiable information from the education records. This is important. It's important to know who the school is disclosing information to. And at the beginning of the year, opt out. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. You have to ask the school district or the school that your child is attending. It could be public, it could be private, whatever. Who are they disclosing personally identifiable information to from education records that they have? And if you do not want that information disclosed, you need to request to opt out, right? A lot of times you'll get that permission slip or notification in the beginning of the year that says, do you want your child to be filmed or photographed while at school? Do you want to allow that or get permission to do that? Well, that's a part of the disclosures that you need to understand, right? Like, where is that information going to go? Who is going to be able to have that media, right? Sometimes, there'll be notifications or notices sent out that say, do you want to allow your child's information to go on the school directory, right? And you can say, you know what? No, I want to opt out, and ask who else is going to have access to that information. Is there a third party that may have access to that information? Well, you don't know unless you ask. Right? School pictures. Is there a third party? They bring in third parties to take the pictures. Do you want your child's picture at other places? Like, all of these things are what we need to be paying attention to. And anybody that's looked at their child's record recognizes that the pictures are in there, right? You see that little school picture that's in the school record. If you haven't looked at them, we're going to be talking about how to do that. Okay. When a student turns 18, so some of us have high school students that are going to be 18 before they graduate. You need to know this. When a student turns 18 or enters a post-secondary institution at any age, the rights under FERPA transfer from the parent to the student, eligible student. So they just told you who an eligible student is, okay? You don't have to go and wonder who's eligible. They're telling you who's eligible to have those rights transferred to them at any age and under what criteria. One example of this is that I have a 16-year-old high schooler who is in college at the same time. She's a dually enrolled high school student. So she's taking her full high school credits to earn her diploma, and at the same time attending college. okay, to earn college credits. At the beginning of the year, in order for me to even talk to any of her teachers, because she ended up getting sick, I had to sign, and she had to agree to sign a waiver to allow me to do that. Teachers wouldn't talk to me. I had her doctor's note. She had, gotten sick. Well, she had a dental thing, whatever. And I couldn't talk to the teachers because she's 16, but she's one of those eligible students where the rights transfer to her instead of me. And so the college wasn't going to talk to me about my minor child because I didn't have the right to do that. She had the right to secure her own records and, keep those private, right? Here's the other part. The FERPA statute is found at 20 U.S. code. Remember, I told you that's what that U.S.C stands for. And that is section 1232G. Okay. So when you see that, you're going to be able to read it from now on. You're going to understand, like, well, what does this say? Like, I see these codes and U.S.C and maybe you see CFR, which I'm going to get into, right? And those little symbols, right? And then a number and another, it's like, whoa, what does that mean? And that can be pretty intimidating. If you don't understand what is being said about your child. Okay. What is being said about your child? And what is being said about your rights? So I'm going to show you exactly how to decode that part of statute and law. And then FERPA regulations are also found at 34 Code of Federal Regulations. You see that CFR or 30 CFR Code of Federal Regulations 34, Part 99. Okay. Now, if you're sitting next to a computer or another device, you can join me in looking that up because I want you to fact check. I specifically said that at the beginning of this, like, I want you guys to be fact checkers. Okay. Know what is being said to you about your rights. All right, we're going to move on. So remember, I told you, if you're just tuning in, when you see this, know that we're going to be diving in a little bit deeper, right? So you can get your notes and your good pen ready so that you don't get that one pen that you find next to you and then you start scribbling and it doesn't even work, right? So go ahead and get ready so that we can talk about how to decode that U.S. code that's dealing with FERPA, okay? And then we'll go back to FERPA. I want you to know what to expect. So I will be letting you know exactly what's going on as we go along. Okay, let me see. All right. So I was talking to you about the United States Code, right? And I want you to know facts about the United States Code, okay? So the United States Code law, facts, they're a comprehensive body of laws, both general and permanent, passed by Congress and organized topically under 50 titles, okay? And I'm going to show you guys what that looks like. A typical citation to the code, for example, 15 U.S. Code Section 290, gives the title number, a number from 1 to 50, the abbreviated title of the code itself, and the section number. And if you see a letter behind it, that breaks it down even further, okay? And so that's how you're going to be able to find things when you see them in the law, policies, and codes, and you see, like, it says 15 U.S. Code Section 290, you know that's what it is. And if you take that and you put it directly into a Google search, it will bring it right up from the place where it's housed at, which I'm going to show you. All right. We did that one. All right. So let's talk about the United States Code 20, Section 1232G. Okay. that particular United States code is dealing with Title 20, which is education. Okay. Chapter 31, you see right here, they're going to break it down to Chapter 31, general provisions concerning education. Subchapter 3, general requirements and conditions concerning operation and administration of education programs. So there is more in Title 20 of the U.S. Code than FERPA. I want you to know that, right? So if you type in Title 20 U.S.C. education, it's going to take you to everything that applies to the U.S. system of education that you need to know. Okay. And I'll show you how to find it in the Code of Federal Regulations as well. All right. And then so you see that. And then underneath there, you'll see Part 4, records, privacy limitation on withholding federal funds. And then Section 1232G, family, educational, and privacy rights. All right. Now, let's talk about the Code of Federal Regulations. So if you see the U.S.C., now you guys are probably recognizing that U.S.C., it means the U.S. Code. But if you see this listed as CFR, right, which usually you're going to see both in the same sentences, that means the Code of Federal Regulations, right? The Code of Federal Regulations. And I don't know why my slides are a little bit off, so I apologize for switching up the slides on you guys, but just bear with me. I'm working with, like I said in the beginning, I had some technical difficulties, so that's why you can't see me, but I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you can see the slides. And so here we are at the Code of Federal Regulations. In the law of the United States, the Code of Federal Regulations is the codification of the general and permanent regulations promulgated by the executive departments and agencies of the federal government of the United States. So remember when you were like in high school and, you might have had a civics class or civics and econ, and you learned that, the U.S. has 3 different branches of government. And we also have a bicameral, a 2-party system, right? Like that's probably what you learned, the executive, judicial, and legislative branches. So now you see it's promulgated by the executive departments and agencies of the federal government of the United States, right? So, if you want more information, look up that flow chart, right? Like if you Google the United States Department of Education, you'll see a whole lot of departments and agencies underneath that you probably didn't even know existed, right? Just look it up. When you get a chance, look at the flow chart, see, and who is responsible for what is important. Knowing who is making rules about your family's educational needs, right? Who is responsible for what? Where is this guidance coming from? And how does the legislature or, the executive branch or the judicial branch interact with these agencies and different government departments? That's important for you to know, okay? The Code of Federal Regulations is divided into 50 titles. Remember the U.S. Code is, right? That represent broad subject areas subject to federal regulation. That means federal accountability, right? And compliance of the rules. That's why it's important to know what's in all those titles. So here's a note though, right? The Code of Federal Regulations annual edition is the codification of the general and permanent rules published in the Federal Register by the departments and agencies of the federal government. Okay. So if you want to spend a night awake, don't watch TV, go to the Code of Federal Regulations and look up what's being said about you in the Federal Register, right? Like who's making these decisions. That'll be an interesting time, I think. All right. And so then you go, if we go to the one that is listed in FERPA, okay, that's 34, Code of Federal Regulations 34, Part 99. And it tells you what the purpose is. It tells you what the purpose is. And we're going to go to it. We're going to dive in a little bit deeper. The purpose of this part is to set out requirements for the protection of privacy of parents and students under Section 444 of the General Education Provisions Act as amended. And then it tells you how they have the authority to do that. Okay, right here is the authority. All right, so I want you guys to breathe and get your extra notepad ready. We're gonna go over to, we already did that one. Sorry. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at that. So this is what we're going to be looking at. If you have another device, like I said, go ahead and, how come it's not, I'm sorry, you guys, I'm having an issue with it coming on. Okay, there it is. I see it. Can you type 1 in the chat if you see it? If you see the screen with the books in the middle, type 1 in the chat. All right. And I have tech support in the back helping me out too. So I think we see it. Okay, we're good. All right. So if you look on the left, thank you. I see the 1. Thank you very much. If you look on the left, you're going to see what we talked about, which is the U.S. code, U.S.C. Remember, Title 20 deals with education. Section 1232G in particular deals with FERPA, right? And then to the right, you'll see the page where Title 34 talking about Part 99 that also deals with FERPA. Remember, that's an annual publication. So when you look at the U.S. Code versus the Code of Federal Regulations, you want to make sure you're looking at the most up-to-date part. Well, how can you know? Well, the dates are going to be up there. And if you look at amendments, sometimes it'll tell you. But when you click on the websites where I got these, which is the credible source of information, the government's actual website at gov.info, it'll say there's a more updated or a recent amendment. Do you want to see that version instead, right? So be mindful of that when you're searching for the education title, and just check it out on your own. So this is part of that fact checking that we talked about in the beginning. Okay. So we're going to go to a guided instruction. Okay, I'm going to show you guys exactly what I just had on that image, how to locate that information and what to look for within that information. So I'm going to ask for tech support to put the first link in the chat and also bring it up on the screen. All right, so everybody has access to that link. That link you're definitely going to want to hold on to and utilize it to go back and get this information. Okay, can we bring up, okay, let's see. Sorry, so here's the link. And let me see if we can bring this up on the screen right now for you guys to see. While you're waiting for me to bring this up, please, if you don't mind, or you don't have to, it's not an obligation, but if you can put it where you're at, where you're tuning in from, that would be great. All right, let's see. Okay, thank you, tech support. Okay, I see it. All right, so as you can see right here, is the website that you just went to, right? Like if you're following along with me, then we are in the same place, okay? And you see this is under the U.S. Department of Education. They have the latest information on the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, okay? And exactly what I was just teaching you about the U.S. Code of the U.S. Code and the Code of Federal Regulations is the first sentence. That's how important it is. That's how important it is. And it tells you it's a federal law that protects. Can you zoom in tech support, please? We can just make that a little bit bigger. Thanks for joining. I see you, Will, Daniela, Darshay, Prince. I see all those names in the chat. Thanks for coming. And if you're in my YouTube audience, you can talk in the chat. Let's see. Can you share the link, tech support? Yes, just zoom in. Okay. Type 1 if you can hear me good, because I don't want to be talking if you guys can't hear me. Type 1 in the comment, or to my YouTube audience in the chat if you can hear me. All right. So we're at the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act page under the U.S. Department of Education. Okay. As you can see, the first sentence, like I said, under that blue box, and there's some links under the blue box that we're going to look at. It tells you what it is, right? So here it is. It says parents, the FERPA gives parents certain rights with respect to their children's education records. Okay. So you are the right holder. Okay. If you're asking to exercise your rights and they're being denied, you need to know what to do next. But you have to know what your rights are in order to say they've been violated, right? Like sometimes we have these experiences and then we feel like it, like, wow, my rights have been violated, but have they really? Do you really know for sure that you have a right to something that you feel violated over, right? So this is why it's important to pay attention. And another key thing to bring up is that when we don't utilize or exercise our rights, it gives other people more influence and power over them. And so we oftentimes wonder why rules and codes and regulations and things, policies change in a way that, are seemingly very distant, right? And so it's really important to lean into this type of stuff to learn more about what it is that you have the right or authority over for yourself and your child, and not to concede that to some distant person or entity, or, government is supposed to work for you, right? It's been weaponized against most of us, that are in here today. I get it. But we also have the responsibility of understanding what is being said about us so that we're not under tyrannical rule. We don't want to be having certain things taken away and not be able to advocate for our rights, especially when we're talking about our kids, right? I don't know about anybody else, and maybe someone has a funny story to share one day, but when I was in the hospital having my children, I don't remember seeing anybody from the school district or the government, any administration or anything like that. I don't remember seeing them in there naming my child. I don't remember seeing them while I was, waking up in the middle of the night. So I want to make sure that I have full control over my child and do what's best for them. And the only way that I have been able to fully do that is by maintaining an understanding of what I have the right to and advocating if I don't have the right, right? I'm not going to just give up if I don't have the right. I'm going to advocate for the right to do it legally, right? Of course. And so this is about your child's records, okay? Again, restating that the right transfers to a student when he or she either reaches 18 or attends a school beyond the high school level. Okay, so know all of this prior to, enrolling your child into places like what type of program is it? I gave the example of my daughter being a dually enrolled college and high school student. So this exception would apply to her. Okay. Students to whom the rights have transferred are eligible students. They just told you what they are. Now, if you go down, here's what it's going to tell you what's all within it, right? Parents or eligible students have the right to inspect and review the student's education records maintained by the school. Okay. You have the right to review and inspect your students' education records maintained by the school. Schools are not required, however, to provide copies of the records unless, now listen to this unlesses, right? Like unless the reasons such as a great distance, okay? If you want to go to the office tomorrow and inspect and review your child's education records, you can walk in and say, I want to use my FERPA rights to review and inspect my child's cumulative file. I want to see the whole thing. You don't want them to, if your child's in the 10th grade and they bring out 5th grade file and it's real skimpy, you're being denied the right to review your student's entire record, right? So be mindful of that, right? I've had parents come to me and say, you know what, I went in the office like you told me, and I asked for the ability to review my child's records, and they put up all of these rules and boundaries where I got to go in this private room or someone has to watch me. And is that okay? Well, not really. You can't take the record with you, but you have a right to review it on school grounds. And so they set up rules. Be mindful of those too, of where if you walk in the office and ask to review and inspect your child's records, they may have you go in with the school clerk, right, into a separate room. You can, take whatever you need and look at that information, inspect it, ask about the use of your camera, right? I have parents that do this once a month. They go in the office and they review and inspect their children's records. They keep their own records so that they can maintain accuracy and make sure that nothing is put in their child's record without them knowing, and that nothing is put in their child's records that are inaccurate. And you have the right to do that. Okay. If you live too far, you have a right to request a copy. It is impossible for parents or eligible students to review the records. If it's impossible, right? There are situations where maybe a parent might not be mobile. Maybe the parent may be disabled or can't, get to the location, right? You can ask. Schools may charge a fee for the copies. If you believe that you cannot afford to pay the fee, you need to request a fee waiver due to your social economic status. Okay. Make sure you know that. If you believe that you cannot pay a fee and the school says, I'm going to charge you $270 to review your child's records and inspect them, right? Because they might say, well, we need to have someone watch you do that. And so, we need to pay for the time that employee takes to watch you. Well, you need to ask for a fee waiver if they ask you to pay and you cannot afford that cost. Okay. And then if they do ask you to pay a cost, then you need to definitely have them itemize what those monies are going towards, what that fee is going towards, right? And so parents or eligible students have the right to request that a school corrects the records which they believe to be inaccurate or misleading. I've done this with behavior reports. Okay. There's been things that I found in my son's record that I did not agree with. words that were used to depict him as a behavior problem. I homeschool now, but I mean, when he was in school for a couple years, this is what happened, right? And I had those things taken out and amended. You cannot talk about a child in the way that, sounds criminal, and so be mindful of the things that are being stated in behavior records or on report cards. I've even, requested amendments on those. Like if they put needs improvement, the child talks too much. Like, wait a minute, like this is not the way that you speak about a child and have this follow them throughout their entire K to 12 education, right? There's some positive or other ways that you can say stuff so that they don't have a stigma or label or a behavior. I'll call it a jacket that follows them, and other teachers see that in their file and they're like, oh boy, I don't know what I'm going to do with, so you really want to be on top of this record stuff. You really do. All right. And hold accountability about it. Right. And every single time you see something that you believe is inaccurate or misleading, some people have reported to me that their children's grades were actually, they were given straight A's. And I mean, I've had parents and grandparents say, my kid has straight A's and they don't even know how to read and write. Somebody is lying here. Well, yeah, that happens too. So if that's inaccurate or misleading information, I'm going to show you how to, go through a process of getting that removed or getting that resolved or getting that investigated. If the school decides not to amend the record, here it is, the parent or eligible student then has a right to a formal hearing. Okay. So you have a right when someone tells you, like, I'm not going to amend it because we already started a new school year and I just don't want to go back and do all that. Plus, I threw everything away. But if you have all the information to prove and they don't, then you can bring that up at the hearing, right? Ask your school, your child's school for those hearing procedures. How do you get a hearing, right? These are things that you need to know. And if they don't have an answer for you, call the State Department of Education. Say, listen, I have a FERPA issue here that I'm trying to advocate for, my child's records to be fixed because they have inaccurate or misleading information in them. I asked for them to be amended. They're not being amended. I would like a hearing. Are you guys going to provide me with the hearing? And make sure you get that timetable. Is that within 30 days, 45 days? Now, I will tell you, getting any information or agreement via the telephone might not be legally binding. Don't do that. Try to make sure you do this through email or either go in and ask for someone to give you a signed, dated copy of confirmation that they're going to be setting you an appointment. I don't care if they got to write it on their notepad, sign, put a time stamp on there and the school's official seal on stamp on there saying that you talked to me at such and such date and time and that you are going to be scheduling a meeting for me to understand more about a hearing process. Any little thing, and that's not being petty, that's keeping a record of what happened, because if you have these phone conversations and you trust and believe what you're being told, then in the end, it'll be your word against theirs. Okay. So you definitely want to have an official running record of this information. All right. After the hearing, if the school still decides not to amend the record, the parent or eligible student has the right to place a statement within the record setting forth his or her view about the contested information. So there are some instances where I have worked with families to advocate about information in the record. And, they were not able to get it amended. And so what they did was to put a counter statement, right? To put in their child's record a statement saying, I do not agree with the information or whatever that may be that you need to do. So I'm going to pause right there for a second. And I want to find out if any of you have any questions, comments, or feedback about what you've learned so far. Okay. So if you have any questions, comments, or feedback about FERPA, you just need a little bit more clarification about, U.S. Code Title 20 or the Code of Federal Regulations, now is your opportunity. Okay, I'll be looking for that in the chat if something comes up. All right, let's go on to, how to do this, right? And as you guys can see, like I'm just reading right off of the official place where this information is. And I'm explaining it in detail of what that can look like in several scenarios, right? So generally, schools must have written permission from the parent or eligible student in order to release any information from a student's education record. I have a template that I typically share with parents on how to request those in written form. Okay. If you need that template, reach out to someone at Minnesota Parent Union so that we can get that template to you. I don't want you to be worried about how you're going to formulate a letter, give written permission in order to have access to your child's records. I have a template that you can take and you can make your own, right? But at least it gives you a framework of how to give that written letter and notification that you're looking to have a copy of your child's records. And again, you can walk into the school and ask to review, you can't take them with you, your child's records. Make sure that whatever grade they're in, if they're in the 8th grade, you need to be able to open that record and see all of their information there. Not just, oh, well, we only have 1 month of information in the record. Well, where is the entire cumulative file, right? I would like to see nurses' reports. I would like to see, any behavioral or assessments that you guys have done, any evaluations that you may have done that didn't require my permission. Okay. If you think that your child has been evaluated, there's a whole different rule that goes to that without your knowledge or your permission. There are some things that they can do legally, right? The schools, meaning without your permission or consent. But there's other things that they cannot. And so if you go to the top, well, if you go all the way to the top in the blue tech support, and you guys see that, right? The Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment, okay, PPRA, right? And so I'm not going to talk too much about that. It's the same thing. It's within the same thing, but there are some other ways that you can look at in protecting your child against those unlawful types of evaluations. Like you don't want, without permission, a school psychologist coming to evaluate your child, right? There are certain things that are just like you need to be informed of. And you definitely tell your child, do not answer questions that are uncomfortable for them or that may be, inappropriately asked to them. I've had this happen and it's led to child protective services types of cases that we want to avoid. So I teach my children not to answer questions from an adult without me present. And so they will definitely say, I can't do that. My mom said, you have to call her. I can't answer any of this. It doesn't matter what kind of pressure they're under. These are things that you have to train your child so that your rights are protected, your privacy and your information is protected, and that you know what's going on and who's asking your child what and where are they putting this information. Okay, so as you can see right here, you have to have that written permission. The template information, if you need it, is in the chat, from the parent or eligible student in order to release any information from a student's education record, right? However, FERPA allows schools to disclose those records without consent to the following parties. Remember, I talked to you guys about that disclosure. Knowing who has access to your child's records without needing your consent. Okay, this is very important. The following parties are under the following conditions. So if you look at this above, it says Code of Federal Regulations 34, Section 9931. The following people or parties have the ability to access your child's records without your consent, okay? School officials with a legitimate interest. You need to find out what that legitimate educational interest is, okay? Ask them, what is your legitimate educational interest in my child or accessing their records? Find out if your school has a sign-in, sign-out process when they review records. Is there something, and where's that information kept on where people are checking out your child's record, right? Find that out. What is their legitimate educational interest? Ask them to show you the code, policy, or law that says they have a legitimate interest. You can't just say you do, right? We need to be asking these questions, all right? Other schools to which a student is transferring. Well, yeah, you know, they're going to do a transfer. They're going to send that file, but you need to find out what that process looks like and how is that going to securely be sent. Is that going to be sent through electronic, means? And how is that going to be secure, right? You can find that out. Are they going to send it through paper, right? And then how long, they will hold on to the information prior to transferring it so that you will be fully informed about what that process looks like and that time frame looks like, okay? Specified officials for audit or evaluation purposes. Well, who are the specified officials, right? The school should be able to tell you, well, I need to know who are specified officials and where are they specified at, right? Where are they specified for the purposes of auditing and evaluating my child's records? Because you have to understand, it's not just your child's records. Your personally identifiable information is in there, right? You have to sign up your child with an address. You have emergency contacts that are listed there. Their information's in there. And so who are these specified officials, right? Make sure that you know. Make sure that you know and understand what they're auditing or evaluating with your child's records or for whatever purposes they're utilizing the records, okay? Appropriate parties. You see how these terms can be vague and ambiguous? Appropriate parties. Who are the appropriate parties, right? Well, this is why we have to be paying attention to our rights and understanding what is being said about us and our children. Who are the appropriate parties in connection with the financial aid to a student? Is that a third party? Are those services contracted out? What's the history behind the third party, right? Are they then gonna take that information and provide it, elsewhere? And what do those agreements look like, right? All of this is relevant to ensuring that you and your child's privacy and information are secure. These are things that you need to know, right? So to comply with a judicial order or lawfully issued subpoena. So if there is a judicial order and, they ask for particular things in the record or just the entire record, then those things, of course, are going to be lawful through subpoenas. Or court orders, maybe custodial orders. You might have a custodial issue and maybe the judge might want to review records or whatever the situation may be. So that's straightforward, right? That's straightforward. It's not vague and ambiguous, right? Appropriate officials in cases of health and safety emergencies. So who are they? Are we talking doctors? Are we talking the Health and Human Services Department? Are we talking the CDC? Like, who are the appropriate officials in cases of health and safety emergency? Your child's school should be able to clarify exactly who they are and what's the process by which they give them the records. Now, I know when safety emergencies happen, there's stuff that happens really quickly, right? But you would like to be informed, right? In case of a health or safety emergency, I would like to be informed about which appropriate officials will be accessing my child's records. Okay. State and local authorities, those are going to be, legitimate authorities, law enforcement, child protective services. And what I mean by legitimate is, like official government entities that are asking for that information. As you can see within the juvenile justice system, I do know that like foster youth also, may have their records accessed to by state and local authorities. And that is pursuant to specific state law. Okay. So each state is going to have their own specific laws that mandate which state and local authorities are able to have access to your child's records, and those that are within the juvenile justice system. I do know that the DOD, the DOJ, and other entities are able to have access to that information, but you want to ask, right? Or do some Google searches, like I told you in the beginning. If this is your first time hearing some of this, it can be challenging, it can be overwhelming, but we got to lean in, right? We got to lean in. And so search, fact check, inquire, ask those questions, study it up, right? I just did this with you guys and, it took us some time, right? And there's so much more information that they have that we can look at. But again, these are the legal basics. And so these are the things that you take and you inquire and ask about, and you study and look for what else you need to know. Okay. Schools may disclose without consent directory information such as a student's name, address, telephone number, date, and place of birth. Well, that's a lot of information, to have for terms like the appropriate parties, right? Or terms like, organizations conducting, I'm sorry, I didn't read that sentence, organizations conducting certain studies on behalf of the school. Well, who are they, right? Are we talking about like just community organizations? Like you need to understand what kind of studies are being conducted for and on behalf of the school and why your records are needed to do that, right? And how they're going to maintain security and privacy around your information, your personally identifiable information. What does that contract and that agreement look like between those organizations conducting certain studies for or on behalf of the school and the school? Okay. What is that third party interest? Okay. Is your child going to, be listed as their name or as a number in their studies? So these are things that you need to know. And what kind of studies, what is going to be publicly available about the study? What kind of information are they looking for? Like there is so much in each thing that is important for us to know. Okay. And so honors and awards and dates of attendance. However, schools must tell parents and eligible students about directory information and allow parents and eligible students find out what reasonable is. What may be reasonable to us may not be reasonable to them, right? Are we talking 72 hours? Are we talking 30 days? Are we talking 45? What is reasonable, right? You need to find out what that is. Ask your school, okay? Reasonable amount of time to request that the school not disclose directory information. I typically, tell parents to do this at the beginning of each school year, and every single year, put in another one. You want to opt out, right? If you want to opt out, then, opt out completely, then you can. If you don't, then, you can just say, well, it's okay to put my child's picture, right? But I don't want any other information in there. Or it's okay to give my email address, but I don't consent to any other information. Well, you need to be able to specify that on a formal written permission slip, either saying it's okay, I fully consent. Don't just check boxes, right? When your child comes home with all those papers in the beginning of the year, and this is going to be in the pile of them, and if you haven't received this, that's something that is against your rights as well. So you need to ask for it, or ask when you signed it, right? Don't just shuffle through those papers and get, a pen out and say, okay, I signed it. Because I know a lot of times the kids, they have contests, and it's like, everybody that brings back this paper tomorrow can get tickets to the popcorn party. Okay, whatever. And so we sometimes as parents, we're doing other stuff, and we just kind of like, okay, I'm going to sign it, right? But are you signing away to say you consent, right? Are you signing away to say that you consent? And so that's the important part. I see a question in the chat about 18. And so if tech support, if you could go down to the top under the blue. Hi, Tamara. I'm going to answer that right now. It says, how does this all change when your child turns 18? Is your child responsible for protecting their info and parent family? So under FERPA, at the age of 18, or if a student attends a school beyond the high school level, the rights automatically transfer to the student. So I gave the example of my 16-year-old daughter, who is a full-time high school student and also a dually enrolled college student. And every single time she has a new class, she gives the college permission for the teachers to be able to share information with me, okay? Because I have no rights to speak to them, and they're not obligated to talk to me, even though she's a minor, because she is a student at a school level beyond high school. And so the rights transferred to her. So that's a good question. You got to know that. All right. And so let's see what else is down here. And then we're going to go over to one other thing, and then I'll let you wonderful people go. I hope you're learning a lot about this. Let's see. Okay. The school needs to tell you about directory information and allow parents and eligible students some reasonable time, we talked about that, to request that the school not disclose directory information about them. Every single year I opted out. I didn't want people to have my information. Okay. That's a lot of directory information. That's a lot of information to just be going on there. And I know, it's like, you kind of feel like the weird one, like, oh, I don't want to be the weird one on my kid out of taking pictures on campus. Well, yeah, I'm not signing a media release consent form. And, whenever, there's something and people say, hey, well, you want to sign the media release? No, absolutely not. Because I don't release images and, videos of my child without understanding. And this happens in more than places than just school, right? Without understanding the use of them, without understanding any third-party agreements you may have, and without understanding if they're going to be sold or what may happen with them, right? I also would advise you to look at, if you're signing permission slips for field trips, if you have that kind of scenario going on, right? Look at that agreement if your child's going to be transported, because you may be agreeing to release all liability in the case of something happening to your child. I never signed those either, right? And when they say, your child's not going to be able to come to the trip, say, for instance, use that as an example. And I say, well, show me in law, policy, or code where you can deny my student access to this field trip or this educational exercise only if I release my liability. Show me where that's at. I've never been able to see it. And so, basically in the end, they, of course have gotten to go, but I'm not going to release liability for you to take my child anywhere outside of my ability to supervise them and be in direct contact with them. And then something happens and then, oops, you know what? I'm sorry. No, I don't think so. So this is why it's important to understand what records mean, right? And how they're being maintained. Okay, so if tech support can go to, do you see, okay, right here where it says at the top in the blue box, FERPA for parents and students, if you can click on that and put that in the chat, I want you guys to look at this FERPA for parents and students K to 12, right? Look at this stuff up here. Go to it and find out what is being said, right? What is being said? Okay, there it is, the link. Can you click on the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment? I want to just walk through that so that people can know that they're in the right place. Okay, so you see that it's going to be an official page. Go ahead and screen down. Yep, there's a lot on this page. This is going to show you the definitions. This is going to show you the usage of, probably answer a lot of your questions, right? And so if you look at the contents area, you'll see they're going to talk about the applicability of the Code of Federal Regulations 34, Part 98, and the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment. Okay, they're going to talk about the General Education Provisions Act, right? Which is commonly referred to as the Protection of Pupil Rights Act. So you might have heard it called PPRA, right? You need to understand that now it's referred to as GEPA for the most part. And so make sure that you understand that by checking those publications in the U.S. the Code of Federal Regulations that are annual publications. The regulations can also be found, and they give you more links. So every time you go, you're going to see, there's more links, because there's a lot of U.S. codes. All right. And let's see, we have a question. The teacher disclosed on public media that an advocate's child transferred out of the district. Is that a FERPA violation? That's not really, it depends on what type of information they gave, like personally identifiable information. If personally identifiable was disclosed, then it could possibly be yes. So depending, if they just like alluded to, there's a student who has transferred, that's typically not, but it just depends on the situation. And so at this same site, there is a complaint form, right? If you believe that your child's, and you can just Google it into Google too. You can put FERPA complaint or pupil rights complaint, right? Pupil Privacy Act rights complaint, whatever you can think of to put in there. But I would just put straight up FERPA complaint. Okay. And then the U.S. Department of Education is going to show you how to file a complaint. And they have videos right there. Can you scroll down? All right. So these are the scenarios by which you can complain and who oversees it and what they can do, right? To investigate that. And you can see you can file that complaint directly on this site. Now, if you are not the parent of the child, you may still be able to file the complaint. Although, if you don't have rights to them, it's not going to be card. What I mean by that is a lot of times we file Office for Civil Rights complaints for civil rights violations, and you don't have to be the parent. You could just be someone that witnessed an event or knows of an event. But that's a little bit different when it comes to FERPA, because again, it's about privacy. It's about records and personally identifiable information. So you're going to want to go to that website that you see. And if we could put that in the chat, okay, it's there. Then you're going to want to go to that website. And for my YouTube audience, I'm going to come back around and put these links in the chat because I know that you're not getting them directly. So this is the site. This is where you're going to want to do, and this is where you're going to want to complain. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and end our session with some information that I want you to be thinking about till next time. And we'll be doing this every week again. So I want you to be thinking about, what is your action going to look like, right? A lot of times we get information and we just walk away from it. And then it's like, okay, well, what do I do with that? Well, start applying it right away so you don't lose it. Okay. Start applying the information right away So there, you don't lose it. And then practice it, right? Even if you don't get it perfect, because theory is a hypothesis about something that may or may not be true, that is falsifiable. Knowledge are those things that have been shown to be true, right? You got to show true evidence, data, search, inquire credible sources of information. Okay. Theoretical learning is what the knowledge is about, and the practical application is how the knowledge is learned. And I don't know why it has a T. Okay, so we'll just fix that later. Needs to be implemented. Practice until you master. Okay, you're not going to walk out of your house tomorrow a FERPA expert if you just found out about FERPA tonight, right? Like, we got to be reasonable with our expectations. Be implemented in certain real life situations. The mode of practical application along with theory gives everyone a clear expectation about facts. So you have been watching Know Your Education Rights with me, Christina Laster, and I hope that you put this all into action and practice. Reach out if you have any additional questions, and we will see you at the same time next week. Bye-bye.